Redditors on the autism spectrum, what is something you want non-autistic people to know or understand? It takes my mind a bit to recalibrate itself. People who are high-functioning or don't look, act autistic are still having a hard time. A lot of us do this thing called masking where we basically act as if we are neurotypical based off of the stuff we learn from others, and it is very exhausting to keep up that fake persona. It's a spectrum. High-functioning people, like myself, can hide it really well. However, we still struggle with a lot of things. I don't have any friends, but no one particularly dislikes me either. I feel like this is due to some rules I follow: be hygienic, be polite, and have a plan to smile and dress normally in public. I can't speak for the low-functioning end, though. If I'm being inconsiderate or hurtful in my speech, I really don't mean to be. I can't easily form a sentence and make my mouth say it in time to keep up with the conversation, and I make mistakes in this process. It's not just a spectrum. It's like being a culture of one and being unable to adapt. It's not that I want to come off some way, angry or sad or whatever, it just doesn't come out right a lot of the time. It's like being tone deaf and trying to sing a song you know. You hear it, you know what song it is, but you try to sing it and it's just incomprehensible. Sometimes it's like that for autistic people. Also, I'm not staring. I'm actually completely dissociating from my vision. I'm not looking at you, or that thing, or anything. That's just where my eyes happened to be pointing when I went inside. Edit. I also dissociate from my vision whenever I am actively listening. It wasn't until I was 19 that someone pointed out that I was always staring at their tits whenever I was talking with them. No, lady, your tits are just down and out of the way, where my face is always pointed. But nowadays I usually have the presence of mind to add off to the left to my down and out of the way. You know those people on the internet who get offended for seemingly no reason you're aware of? Imagine if almost everyone was like that. That is what having autism is like. We aren't Rain Man. No, really, I don't get what you mean and I do need it explained in clear, non-sarcastic terms. Please don't be nervous to ask me questions about my autism. If I tell you that I have it, it actually probably means I want to talk about it. I love talking about it. And also, there are no stupid questions. I appreciate you trying to learn. What's stupid is if you ask a question, I give you an answer, and then you tell me I'm wrong. Be open, be interested, and I will talk for hours. First of all, apologies for ever being annoying. Second, we don't always want help, even if we look like we really need it. For me, I've had someone helping me all of my childhood, whether I liked it or not. It made me feel inadequate and helpless. Now as an adult I have a lot of trouble asking for help because I have that 3-year-old mentality of, I can do it all by myself, wait a while or until I do something dangerous before offering assistance. I'll feel less useless that way. Edit. Grammar. I'm not a child. Don't talk down to me. I always feel like an alien from a different planet when talking to people. Please try your best to help me understand things. I love learning. I am not looking away from you to be rude. Eye contact just feels super weird. Hi. My name is Dylan, and when I was 17, a very nice lady who my parents paid a lot of money to explain why I wasn't doing as well in school told them, in a tangent, that I had high-functioning Asperger's. This is not why I wasn't doing well in school, but it was the first time my parents had even considered the notion of one of their children being autistic. My childhood, unbeknownst to me, was something of a social trial by fire. I interacted with the autistic kids and I wasn't put into speech because I appeared to be if a bit hyper-focused and misplaced, typical growing boy. As a result, I taught myself a lot of the habits or mechanisms you see here without knowing that I was doing all of this in part due to the fact that I operate a little bit differently than other folks. Currently, the most upvoted comment on this thread is by you, JacobyBeef98, who brings up the fantastic and often underlooked masking mechanism, wherein high-functioning individuals adapt and learn how to appear neurotypical from watching others interact, or even sometimes finding an individual they admire and attempting to repeat their personal formula for success, and #X200B. This is something I got incredibly good at due to my late diagnosis. And #X200B, but there was a downside. There's a lot of things that a lot of people are unable to mask. A big issue which is typical among high-functioning folks is that they develop a case of imposter syndrome, and thus find difficulty forming long-term, meaningful relationships. Some folks, regardless of how good at masking they are noise sensitive, form headaches easily, or get irritated in social settings. It can also be very difficult forming a good sense of introspection, and often confusion is a hallmark of any emotional swing. These seemingly small quirks, over time, can cause stress on friendships, especially if the other individual is either misinformed about what autism is or believes the subject to be neurotypical. If you notice these sorts of behaviors in a friend or colleague, perhaps try to be a bit understanding about the whole thing, not condescending, but understanding. And #X200B. Very commonly, you'll also find individuals who hyperfixate. These are also known as special interests. Commonly, Legos, trains, dinosaurs, space, rocketry, circuitry, engineering, Minecraft, the list goes on. They tend to collect a lot of information on their interest, and spend a lot of time studying and enjoying it. This, however, by no means makes them geniuses. I often see a stereotype in media portraying people on the spectrum as math geniuses, or as if they sacrificed social skills for skills in their special interest, but this isn't true. By all means, a special interest can be directly translated to passion. The kids you know who obsess over remembering models of World War I aircraft or the serial numbers of sirens, yes, this one is real, and I've met someone with it. Put just as much work into memorizing those facts as you would. To give perhaps a clearer example, I like to say my special interest is astronomy. To make my work easier, I taught myself a bit of calculus in high school to help me understand concepts a little easier. I was, however, in the lowest class for mathematics, and because I couldn't understand the source material, I had a hard time with geometry and nearly failed statistics, but because it fuels my passion, I continue pursuing astronomy, and in January I am moving from Connecticut to Hawaii to pursue a PhD, and #X200B. Finally, it is commonly known that the autistic brain has a slightly different method of processing information. Truly sympathizing with that seems difficult to folks who aren't on the spectrum, and leads to misinformation. What you really need is to practice empathy, and remember that just because someone thinks differently than you doesn't mean that they're different from you. And #X200B. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Conversations for me are extremely artificial. The way I talk is how I think normal is. Small talk is almost always completely pointless and annoying to me. I haven't been diagnosed as in the spectrum, but my younger brother is very far up the spectrum. I think everyone needs to know Autism Speaks is a god-awful charity that does not care about anyone with autism. It drives me crazy when people share a picture of their autistic brother, or a super cute autistic kid, as if that is their one defining characteristic. It's not a news story that someone with autism has a job, or competes in a competition. Holy garbage, we are people. I may not look autistic, but I am. Also, how does one look autistic? Please respect that I don't like to be touched. Don't try to manhandle me. I have recently been told I am somewhere on the autism spectrum. I am almost 22. You wouldn't think I was, but I am. I don't understand emotions. Sad? Angry? Happy? It is all over my head. You must tell me how you feel, otherwise I'm none the wiser. There are so many points I could make, but one of the most important for me is that description of autism symptoms are skewed. Autism for so long has been defined by people who don't have it themselves: parents, educators, psychologists. It's described in external terms: difficulty with social skills, emotional regulation, awkwardness, in other words, how it affects everyone around them. Autism for me is a very internal experience, thinking with a brain that is very different, senses constantly overwhelmed, feeling lost in a world you don't understand. I get that interacting with us can sometimes be difficult, but think about how it feels to be someone who has those difficulties. I didn't ask for that. Being autistic for me has meant so many of things people take for granted. I knew I would probably never do or have: children, spouses, sex, 9-to-5 jobs, friend groups, going out to the bar, standard interests. Not only that, but for all my daily social interactions, I have scripts. I rehearse scenarios and think beforehand of everything I will say. The idea that people will decide to do spur-of-the-moment activities or conversations is foreign to me. Almost all the decisions I make have been thought through beforehand, considering cost-benefit. I know that sounds exhausting. It is, but if I didn't make decisions this way, the consequences would be much more dire. They have been dire. Now most of these activities don't interest me anyway, but it does leave me wondering what I'm missing. I do often feel lonely and isolated from the rest of society. Having autism isn't devastating, but I still feel like I haven't learned how to manage it. Don't ask us whether we are autistic and start putting us down after. I can only say this about myself. I often take things seriously when people say something to me. I can tell when people are joking, but if people criticize me in a joking way I might take it seriously, like joking about the way I speak or if I pronounced a word wrong. I don't want people to tread on eggshells around me, but if people joke about one of my traits, as opposed to joking about a trait that I evidently do not have, I'll get embarrassed and start questioning myself.